And we're live.
Indeed, we are. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yes, it has.
Welcome back. You
Thank
didn't go
you.
anywhere, neither did I. I forget why. There was just so many conflicts. That's what it was.
There was, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
My
so,
brother was over for a while, and you were out for a while, so
yeah. Anyway,
life gets in the way.
indeed, good to be back.
Yep. Good to see you.
And I have to say, it's been a very dreary spring here in Chicago. It's kind of amazing. I was expecting a little more sun, but it's just like
Oh,
never been consistent. And the best thing have been the thunderstorms.
those can be fun.
Yeah, but there have been a lot of them. Um, anyway.
Hope
Uh,
it's not too cold anyway.
Well, it is pretty cool. Like
Yeah.
it's not going to break 50 today, which is absurd for the end of, well, for May 1st.
May
Yes, happy May
1st.
1st, May
Happy May
Day.
1st. Yeah, it's when we're recording this. It's May
Actually, what we
1st.
should be talking about, you wanted to talk about wisdom, but I'm realizing what maybe we should talk about is right livelihood. Since it's May
May Day.
Day. Yeah. Of course,
Yeah.
this won't air on May Day, so that'll be another
Mm-hmm.
episode, which it's been a while since we talked about. But what I'm curious, like, sort of what prompted the question, what is wisdom for you?
Oh, well, it's kind of the question that sort of ends everything, right? I mean, it's sort of the big question, right? Um, in philosophy, where I did a lot of work, uh, at least the ancient Greeks thought of it as sort of the whole point of philosophy is what
Hmm.
is philosophy is the love of wisdom, philosophia, and uh, wisdom is to try to find the right way to live, right? And I very much think that the Buddha's picture was in line with that.
Hmm.
Um, that Justin Whitaker and I wrote a paper quite a while ago on the Buddha as a philosopher, and looked at the ways that the Buddha's whole project can be seen as a search for that kind of wisdom. And I think that it's particularly pressing right now nowadays, uh, because of the role of intelligence, artificial intelligence in the world, and looking at, in particular, when we look at what wisdom is, um, trying to understand the ways, and I think there are very, very important ways that it's different from intelligence,
For sure.
because oftentimes in the popular imagination, and even in the imagination of some very sophisticated people, wisdom and intelligence tend to run together. It's the idea that the more intelligent you are, the smarter you are,
Right.
the sort of the wisdom falls out. Just you become wiser by becoming smarter and more intelligent and more knowledgeable. And I think if we've learned anything over the past, well, I was going to say 30 years, but we might as well say for over the past 2,500 years, it's that intelligence and wisdom don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. I mean, they're
Exactly.
related,
Yeah.
they're similar. I mean, there's definitely overlap there. We're not
Yeah.
going to say there isn't, but the overlap is less than we might think.
Yeah. Yeah. And um, when we just go right to the Dharma, right, and there are the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion, and they're
Hmm.
opposite, right? And the opposite of delusion is wisdom, but that wisdom isn't coming from. There is obviously some cognitive awareness, but then there's everything else. So the embodied knowing of the truth,
Right.
or of truth, I should say. Um, yeah, it was funny. I was this past weekend. I was co-facilitating a retreat slash workshop for 15 MBA students from the Kellogg School at Northwestern,
Oh wow.
and it was great. Actually, it was a residential retreat somewhere in southern Michigan, and uh, there was a lot of silence. And I would get ready to give a talk, and these these guys, it was a great group, 15 students. But they were like all ready with their pens and their notebooks. And I just had to say, no, you're not going to be tested on this. It's just hear what you hear. And it was really kind of a shock, I think, to them because they're so used to that kind of learning. And they finally got it by the end of the weekend. This is very different. And
So what were you trying to get across to them? What was the
at that point, it was about compassion. That talk was about, I mean, the whole workshop was about, it was, in fact, the woman who put it together, who was also one of the students in the school, she had this, and she's a wonderful teacher herself and a very good, mainly in the yogic world. Um, and she created this thing called Wisdom Trek, which I don't know that she's trademarked it yet. I think she needs to, because I mean, it was specifically for people in business or people in executive roles, who, see their role as one thing, but what happens if they bring other wisdom teachings into it? And so that particular night, I was talking about compassion and the cultivation of compassion and absolute compassion and relative compassion and all of this stuff, and ending with the Tonglen practice. But it was, and I think that what's so interesting, even on retreat, when you're in silence, and, if you're in real silence, then you're not even reading, right? So it's all about the wisdom you gain from just being present with yourself, as well as present with others, but in this very special way. What is learned in that process? And I mean, when I say learned, I don't mean on an intellectual level, but what is learned on the embodied level. And I think that's one of the major, at least in a Buddhist context or in a mindfulness context even, that one teacher calls it knowing that you know. The knowing that you know, right? It's like, how do you know that you know? Well, it's just, there's no thought about it when something arises, when there's a response required. There's no thought about the response. The response itself comes from this place of embodied wisdom, which comes from a place of, first kind of knowing the frame to look in or look through, experiencing that, and then really taking it in, having this mind-body complex take it in fully, and then we truly are, I think, we're responding from a place of wisdom, and
well, depending on how we respond. I mean, that's the thing, is we all have our automatic responses to events.
But an automatic response is a reaction.
Right, and it's not necessarily wise.
No, definitely, usually not. I mean,
Usually not.
You don't, it's reactive. It's going back to the lower part of the brain, right? And sometimes that's really needed, obviously, but more often than not, we can respond in other ways. But that response, and that's why practice is so important, because the response is coming from that deeper place that is not, you can't put your finger on where it is, but it's not here, or it's not, in the thinking way, it's not here. And yet thought is important. It's like, and we've talked about that, like when are thoughts of value, and it seems in the Buddhist context, the thoughts are of great value when the thoughts are helping you see something,
right,
that then you sort of deeply experience,
right.
That
Or in the case of wisdom, you can have a very wise, compassionate response, but it's your knowledge, your intelligence in the true sense, that helps you then tailor that response to the particular context that you're in. If you're knowing about the facts of the world what are going to help you be successful in bringing that compassion to realization. So there's a role for both, but
of course, yeah.
The beginning part of it, or at least the the part that gets it going in the right direction is the wisdom. And I think for many of us, I know for myself, part of the deeper problem is to know when we're, you know, when we can trust our deep intentions, and when we can't, or when, you know, when we, yeah, and you know, it may be easy coming you know, from the other side to say, oh, it was obvious all along, but when you're in it,
Right.
oftentimes it's not really obvious. You're really muddling through, making decisions under, you know, imperfect information.
False pretenses.
Yeah, or whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, or conflicting interests. You know,
Right.
conflicting aims. You know, and trying to work out, you know, what's the best way forward here, given that I don't know everything, and
Right.
that I have different, you know, interests and different aims, and the person that I'm responding to, or the people that I'm responding to, may have different aims, and it's oftentimes much, at least in my experience, much more muddled. You know, it seems simple in a sense, but it's not. I mean, I mean, wisdom is a can of worms.
Yeah, and I think what happens, I mean, in my experience is, and I'm just kind of thinking of over the course of my learning practice and working with different teachers, something is transmitted, right? I mean, just as an example, the 5 daily reflections, right? So on one level, the 5 daily reflections: I am of the nature to grow old, I am the nature to become ill, I am the nature to die, all that is near and dear to me will vanish, I am born of my karma, heir to my karma, etc. Um, so that's information. Of course, it's obvious information, at least the first four, right? But it's one thing to sort of take it in, to know it, to say, of course I'm going to die, you know. But then when you actually fully inhabit that knowing,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, and so what is the wisdom that arises from that? And it's like, oh, so every moment is important, whatever, you know. And how would I respond if I knew that tomorrow I'm going to be dead? You know, any of those things, you know, these are questions that arise. That thought arising is an important thought to then use that as a frame to gauge the response, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it comes to karma, it's like, you know, uh, there has to be a level of acceptance to the teaching. And then as we go through our lives, it's like having trust in the wisdom that is gained over a period of practice, over a period of years, right? And so there is a certain aspect of trust and confidence in one's own embodied wisdom, to
Mm-hmm.
trust it. And then if it's wrong, I mean, if it turns out, oh, that was a mistake, right? Then, you know, that's more information for greater and deeper wisdom. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is like, well, when do we cut off? You know, and we don't,
Yeah.
hopefully, right?
Well,
Um,
and the other thing is that part of wisdom, I think, is the ability to step back from our prior decisions or
right.
questions that we've had, and to realize, oh, that wasn't right. I think that, you know, there's maybe there's um, a kind of character of wisdom that says that we have to get everything right all the time. You know, that the wise person is basically a kind of you know, god of, you know, sort of
Mm,
like all knowing and all the rest, um and I think it doesn't work that way. I
no.
think that, you know, what true wisdom looks like in somebody is going to be more uh, humble than that. You know, it's going to be somebody who is trying to do their best, and is going to mess up every once in a while and is going to try to learn from their mistakes and
Yeah.
be open to learning from their mistakes. I think openness to learning from your mistakes is kind of like part of what wisdom is, right? I mean,
Totally.
you
Totally.
know, yeah, it's not holding ourselves up to standards that we can't attain.
And when you meet somebody who says, I have great wisdom, stay away.
Yeah,
It's
stay
just
away.
like,
Yeah.
let yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And often, I mean, I can speak from my own experience. It's like when I'm teaching others, or with another who's asking me questions, right? Uh, if I respond immediately with an answer, that's not wisdom, right? That's just intelligence or lack thereof, right? And and if I assume that whatever I'm going to say is correct, that's not wisdom, right? I just have to like wait and also ask a question back and then see what comes next. And um, I'm much better that I can do with another, but when it comes to like bringing wisdom to my own experience, sometimes I'm completely it's just like forget it.
Mm,
It's like it's trusting myself in my own decisions is sometimes really hard, and
yeah.
I find that to be a fascinating phenomenon in itself.
Well, it's
Um,
always the second guessing. I mean,
yeah,
that
yeah,
at least, I mean, I'm speaking for my own self, but for
sure,
me, it's
yeah,
always the second guessing of, what should I have done differently? What could I
yeah,
have, could I have made this better by having done this instead of that? And papancha, it's
yeah,
just
yeah,
this
yeah.
kind of uh, awareness of the fact that our mind likes to spin out these
Well, it
stories for
tells
us.
tells tells the same stories to me.
Yeah.
When I'm working with somebody else, I don't know their stories
Ah,
necessarily.
yeah,
So
of
it's like,
course. Yeah.
but it was interesting. Like I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody who recently joined our community, and she had left another sangha that shall remain unnamed, um, where she was in the process of. She'd been with this group for over 4 years, studying with them, and she really had a certain level of respect for how much they quote knew, I guess. Um, and this was a Buddhist organization, and but the teachers they only taught from one teacher, and we're using a book or series of books, and we're teaching from the book. And whenever a question was asked, they would just answer the question and not want to be questioned about their answer.
Ah, okay.
And I said, and when you asked a question, did they ever ask a question back? And they never did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, what was your experience, or what? And I was actually stunned
Mm,
to hear this about this particular tradition, um, which is a newer tradition, but
mm-hmm.
still one that is all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
and is a Buddhist tradition. Um, but it felt so dogmatic as she was describing it, and then I
Mm-hmm.
read up about it later and realized, yeah, that this is why. But anything that's like teaching from a fixed view, one has to question. So where's the wisdom if you're just coming from that view?
Yeah, I mean, of
Um,
course, I think a lot of, I mean, my understanding is that in a lot of more traditional ways of teaching, that is kind of the
mm,
standard. Um,
right.
and I mean, again, my understanding is that for instance, in Tibet, when you get a geshe degree which is their sort of PhD
Right.
in
Yeah.
Buddhist studies, which takes many, 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 many years to achieve. I mean, it's pretty
Oh,
much
for
the
sure.
same way. You
Yeah.
do uh, cross-examinations with each other and debates,
Yeah.
but the debates have answers that are already understood. They're not. It's not like you're trying to find out something for yourself that's new or whatever or
Right,
different.
which is why all geishas are not necessarily great teachers, or they're not great. They may know a lot intellectually, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what is their actual experience with what they know? And I think that's what it comes down to. It's like, and and yeah, I mean, obviously this is their tradition of teaching,
Mm-hmm.
but then when you're working with people who are coming from a different place,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not about gaining all this encyclopedic knowledge of the particular suttas and those teachings and all of that, or even debating it. It's like, I mean, debate is one thing. It's like great, because I mean, in a debate, I suppose you can start questioning what you think you know, and then like testing it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe wisdom comes from that, maybe not, right? So, but it's in the deep lived experience of those teachings, one would
Right.
hope, that the wisdom arises.
I mean, I don't think the debates are going to lead necessarily to wisdom. I mean, they certainly, a really good debate can help increase your knowledge and intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I think.
I mean, of course, a bad debate can just be disastrous. I mean, it can lead you all kinds of astray
Yeah,
because a lot of, I mean, again, going back to ancient Greece, one of the things that that Plato talks about is the role of rhetoric and the problem of rhetoric, because in his day, you had all of these so-called sophists, which was a group of people who were taught rhetoric, taught these kind of tricks, rhetorical techniques to make in order to enable them to argue either side of an issue and win,
right.
which I think a lot of us will know. I mean, that's some things they teach you in law school, right? I mean, and other places. And that to Plato, and I'm sure to the Buddha as well, would be anathema. I mean, that's the very definition of delusion is being able to convince somebody of something whether or not it's true.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why debates are very problematic to me. I mean, they're again, a good debate is great. It can definitely lead you in the right direction, but you have to be careful with them.
I mean, what's interesting, like if we look at the quote debates that the Buddha might have had. I mean,
He
those
did have debates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but as I recall, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but usually when he was in discussion with somebody who was coming from another teacher or the other teacher themselves, his normal way of debating would be to bring an example in, ask the person, well, how would you deal with this situation? How does your teaching relate when this comes up? And just get them to question themselves in that process, particularly when it was a student from another teacher, right?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite Socratic. I mean,
Right.
you're talking really about Socratic debate, where Socrates would ask questions and just get the other person to state their own position, and he
Right.
was basically
That's about
acting as
positions. Yeah.
he's basically critiquing that position. The Buddha did have his own positive, but you're right. I mean, he would do both. He would tend to
Yeah.
ask them about their position, and then he would come back with his own.
But he would usually, I mean, I'm just thinking it, when he would ask them about their position, it was from a place of, well, how did that work out in your life, right? How did that position hold up in the midst of it? I think that's
Yeah, but in some of them, he also talked about grounds of knowing. How do you know? You claim. When he talks to the Brahmins.
right,
He'll say, the Brahmins will say X, Y, and Z about the Vedas or whatever it is, and he'll say, well, but where do you know this? How do you know this? Does your teacher know it? Did your teacher see it for himself or herself?
right,
No. Okay. Did your teacher's teacher see it for themselves? No. I mean, this kind of thing. So that's where he comes up
right.
independently with this, the metaphor of the blind leading the blind,
Right.
saying that, your teachers say that they knew, but they never saw anything. And, so
Yeah.
that was one of his strategies, was to
Right.
say, you seem to be,
They didn't know that they
arguing,
knew. In other words, they
yeah,
never knew that they knew.
that
They
there was
just sort
no,
of took
yeah,
it at
there was
face
nobody
value.
at, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There was
Um,
no real meeting of the world.
yeah. Or the what is it? The four blind guys going to an elephant.
Oh, the blind man and the elephant. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's four different. That's a slightly different idea, where each person has their own part of the elephant, but they haven't seen the whole picture.
Right.
Whereas the idea of the blind leading the blind is really that they don't know anything. They're just wandering around in the wilderness.
Yeah. 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 No, it's really, but just bringing it down to the core teachings of, in our practices, right? It's like, how, what is the wisdom that is gained by directly experiencing impermanence, and at what point does that direct experience become a completely embodied experience? And so this notion of dukkha arising is just known as it's happening, not thought about. It's just like, oh, here it is again, or
Mm-hmm.
here it is always. However we experience, however we take it in, and then responding to other experiences of dukkha from this place of embodied experience from something else. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
just, and even the notion, say in an MBSR class, where people, when they first start to meditate, whether it's a body scan or an awareness, a focused attention practice, it's like, what is the wisdom you gain by starting to see how the mind is just going all over the place?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, that's just this mind doing its normal thing, and when I bring it back, in time, oh yeah, and the mind can actually settle. And so it's like there's the and whatever I say is almost irrelevant at that point. It's like, yeah, okay, and and then what
Well, yeah,
happens?
and then describing it is really like, point again. You, like you were saying before. The description is helpful to point us in the right direction.
Yeah,
In other words, what do you get out of contemplating impermanence? You can point in the right direction, but at the end of the day, that description is not going to be sufficient. I mean, you can say, oh, if you contemplate the fact that everything that you hold here, near and dear to you, will be lost. What is the wisdom you gain from that? Well, you can say a whole bunch of you can
sure,
make a whole bunch of
yeah,
claims about,
yeah,
but at the end of the day, those claims are not the wisdom. I mean, they
right,
are, they point at the wisdom, but you can agree to all these claims and not have that wisdom. And in
yeah,
fact, that's what happens.
yeah,
That's what happens for me. Is that, yeah, I get the point in an intellectual sense.
yeah, yeah,
But it's having it's having that knowledge run deeper into the way that you actually are interacting with the world from an emotional place, which is a much deeper kind of confrontation with that.
yeah, for sure. I'm just sorry. I was sort of thinking about koan practice,
Yeah.
which is like taking you completely out of that part of the mind, theoretically, right?
Hmm.
Because if you try to figure out a koan from an intellectual level, you're missing the
You're
point,
lost.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like, what's the feeling that arises from this question?
Mm.
Um, and just letting that be, and just kind of percolate. And
Yeah, I mean, for
yeah,
me, the only thing about and I love koans, don't get me wrong, but is that I don't know what to do with them. I mean, in other words, I mean, wisdom isn't just getting rid of the intellectual mind, because you can get rid of the
no,
intellectual mind and do all kinds of damage.
right.
you
No,
know?
wisdom is seeing the limits of it, I think.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's also again, I mean, we can say what wisdom is in lots of ways, being aware of the problems of the world and trying to fix them, or trying to do what we can to make the world a better place, and trying to alleviate suffering, and that kind. I mean, these are statements that are perfectly intellectually comprehensible. They're not koans.
Right.
They're right there. So for me, the problem with the koan is that it doesn't lead me anywhere. Once I knock out, if I try to knock out the intellectual stuff, I'm sort of left. What do I do? How does that tell me what to do? Maybe some people are better than I am at that kind of. I'm sure they
Yeah,
are.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
is it really about doing anything?
Well, but if we don't do anything, then
No, I mean doing anything in terms of the koan itself. It's like, okay,
mm-hmm.
it's more like taking you out of that part of your mind opens up something else, presumably, and then
Maybe, yeah.
whatever is done is done.
Mm-hmm.
After that, yeah, no, this is great. This is so much. We could have 10 different podcasts on this. Bring on 10 different people to see what their wisdom is, what wisdom they gain, and how do they define it, and whatever. But I think this embodied knowing, for me at least, is and learning to trust that embodied knowing. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
In many ways. Yeah. So anyway, let us hear your ideas on wisdom, I think.
Exactly.
And
anyone has any comments?
Yeah.
All ears.
Because it's a big. I'm looking at this book, The Perfection of Wisdom, First Bloom. And who's behind me? Prajnaparamita, right behind me. It's like, yeah. Just because Prajnaparamita is behind me doesn't mean I have it. At least not all the time.
Join the crowd.
Yeah. So this is why we practice.
Yeah.
So, and I wouldn't say it's why I drink coffee, although there are times in the midst of drinking coffee where like something will arise.
The wisdom will arise from the cup.
It's it is there, the perfect wisdom of coffee, or the wisdom of dogs. Speaking of which, how are your cats?
Cats are lovely.
Okay.
I love my cats.
And do cats have Buddha nature?
Moo, right? I think that's the answer.
Right. Okay, friends, good to be with you, and let's try to be back next week. I think we can. While we can, before you go off and start studying Japanese, Doug.
That's right.
All right, friends, to be continued,
Yep.
and keep digging the Dharma.
Keep digging the Dharma.